Welcome to Unlayered, the show where we explore next generation blockchains. I'm Saul, and today we got the full squad, Dave and Zen, and we're doing a bit of a roundup, just talking about a variety of things happening in the space, current narratives, and let's just get into it, guys. I think one thing I want to start off with is the state of Solana, just in terms of performance, network, usability. I have a lot of thoughts on it. Basically, it didn't work. The chain just didn't work for, 6 weeks or whatever. It's gotten a little bit better. It's not quite as bad as it was 3 weeks ago when no one could plan transactions. Tons of discourse on the timeline. People getting into semantics of like, oh, actually, if you look at the chart and definition of failed transaction, it's not really failing. Look, none of that matters. The chain was literally not usable at all. I am building a product where we try to land transactions on chain, and we're praying every time that our users don't have a failed transaction. And there was a time there was a period of like 3 weeks where basically every other transaction was failing unless we optimized the heck out of the calls and made sure we use priority fees. Look, developers shouldn't have to think about all this. We shouldn't spend like a week trying to fully optimize every piece of the stack that touches on chain. The network was neither fast nor cheap. It was just a regular old plain Jane blockchain network. So, what do you guys think about those congestion issues? Is this going to be a whack-a-mole thing, or will Solana actually figure this out?
To be quite honest, I didn't have that much congestion, maybe just because I wasn't trying to land a whole lot on chain during that time, because meme coins weren't doing as well for a little bit there. So I wasn't trading that often. But yeah, I don't know. At some point, I feel like these things are just growing pains, right? I do think Solana has a credible path to solving all these things. But it's kind of the network weight has grown to the point where you can't move as fast as before, considering other clients and stuff. And so I think internally it's felt, you can see that Solana is pretty concerned about it. It's kind of the number one thing that they're trying to solve. But it does make it leaves room in the narrative for someone else to come in, which is I think the biggest danger there, right?
Yeah, but it has definitely got better, as you say. I would say, yes, there are alternatives, and yes, you could deploy on other chains, but ultimately, if you're doing a social application or something that's going to be a high touch application, you want to go somewhere where you can put through loads of transactions without worrying too much, and where there's a nexus of people already doing lots and lots of online transactions. So you can go to some L2 that's just doing 5-10 TPS or whatever, but you're just not going to have that large nexus of people. So unfortunately, if we're going to have some of these chains become huge and sort of the substrate for a vast number of different applications and different verticals, then we are going to inevitably have to go through these pains, because every other chain would also be struggling, I think, at this point. The only one I'd say maybe could be doing okay is Sui at the moment is super impressive. It's doing its spam thing, which basically ore mining. And that seems to be holding up really, really well. But, Solana has been tested like no other chain out there. And so I'm always quite loath to fall in line when people say, Solana doesn't work, because I just don't think other chains have been tested to the same degree.
It's also congestion is kind of the most bullish problem to have. Most chains would kill to be congested.
Yeah. What is the fix exactly entail? Is it an economic fix with the structure of fees, or because I hear a lot of just mixed opinions on how effective Quick can be improved, as well as also if you're just weighing the throttling mechanism based on stake, doesn't that just mean 10 nodes or whatever are going to control most of the network? Help me understand some of these proposed fixes to the network.
Yeah. As far as the stake weighted problem, I think that one is less clear how to solve. Although, I think there are some credible paths forward. I don't know if Solana has really wanted to do it, but you could do shared validator technology, like distributed validators, to where like a single stake is shared between like a couple nodes that get to like rotate, right, for access. But that's not like a simple solution. None of this stuff is simple anymore is kind of the problem. It's like none of these fixes are actually all that simple. So there's a networking problem with Quick. There's like an economics problem with the fee model. It all has solutions. There's like very viable paths to solving, but like at this state of the network, right? It's like there's multiple clients that are trying to like operate. They need to be a lot more careful with the releases so that like the network doesn't go down. And so there's just like weird pain, right, in between. And so like the Quick problem is actually pretty interesting. They're actually like needing to work with Google to change the Quick protocol. And so like my understanding of it now, like I'm less involved in this stuff now that I'm not with labs. But my general understanding of it is in Quick, you have to, when someone requests a connection to your RPC node, like you have to actually acknowledge it in software before you can disconnect the connection. And so in like most cases, like that's fine. You won't have people request another connection. You just like act and disconnect. And because Quick requires that act, like there's no way to just like immediately deny. And so what happens is they're getting all these new connections spinning up at requesting, and they have to actually acknowledge them before they can shut them off, which takes up a bunch of time in the software. And another problem is you can't offload it to hardware. Like Quick is not like a protocol where you can do that ACK in the actually network interface card, like unlike TCP, because it's like been coded into like network interface cards where it can handle this for you, right? And so that's like another problem is it's like using up user space. So they're actually like having to work with Google to like fix the Quick protocol to like allow you to like disconnect the connection without like acknowledging it, which is like not a simple fix, but is like actually net beneficial. Like most people using Quick or like in these type of adversarial environments are going to face this. It's just like something the protocol wasn't designed to deal with, right? So I think like, when that gets solved, like that'll be great. And then there is like a more like broader, economic back pressure issue there. But that's going to, like that's almost a governance problem. It's going to take time to solve.
But isn't there also an issue just about if you're paying higher fees, there should be a way that you're going to get to the top of the list, basically. Whereas at the moment,
yeah, and then that's like the scheduler as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you're right. Like they're just taking in so much that like there's no guarantee that like if you pay more, you're actually at the front of the queue. Because the way the scheduler worked before is kind of random as to like where it picks the incoming transactions from, and then it's just like shoving you in like the most like non-filled priority queue. So they are releasing a new scheduler that's like essentially like a single entry point for all the transactions, and it orders them based on their fees from there.
Does this everything that happened with Solana make you more bullish Monad and that scaling approach, or like how do you feel about the state of high throughput blockchains?
I think like some of the problems they're facing, like we're going to face in the tail end of things anyways, right? So like I'm somewhat grateful that like they're having to face it first, because like we're going to need some of these fixes regardless. I'm not 100% sure if our Quick implementation, if we're using the same ACK loop they are, but we might be, right? In which case like we would also need this fix from Google anyways, right? If we ever get to that like level of being hammered. And so in some sense, I'm like, okay, like these are problems like high throughput blockchains are going to have to solve. But in other senses, like I have been convinced that like not having a scheduler is a better choice. Like I actually think like having the scheduler is a huge overhead that you don't need now. And so like there are aspects of Mana that I think are like better designed, right? But we'll just have to see in prod, right? It's hard to like talk your book until you've seen it. So
at least doesn't Monad as a mempool though, right? So it could at least maybe shrug off huge spikes in activity a bit better than something like Solana.
Yes and no. Like even in the mempool, you still have to propagate transactions, right? And so like you're kind of just like moving the problem to a different stage, but never necessarily solve it, right? So like
But is that just particular with Monad? Because like Ethereum can take, a huge number of transactions, as I understand, and it still spews out its 15 TPS and doesn't go down. So is that also propagating these transactions, or is it just built in a different way?
I think it's like not as big of a problem. So like a mempool does help in the sense that like you have this like buffer, right? And so like your buffer can be filled up, but like I also just don't think people are sending transactions that fast into Ethereum. Like I don't think you can actually like most tooling on Ethereum can't like generate transactions that fast. So like it takes like 3 milliseconds to do like a signature on Ethereum. So like, like one thing we're actually like facing and testing is like even on Foundry, like if we try to like spin up and have it like throw in as many Ethereum transactions we can, like you only actually can get up to 3,000 transactions a second, like because 3 milliseconds per like signature. And so like even the tooling can't get up to 10K TPS. So you have to like run a bunch of instances, which is really annoying. And so like I just think like the user behavior on Ethereum is not something that incentivizes like you sending in a lot of transactions. Like a lot of these transactions are like if it was just user transactions on the network, I actually don't think it would be congested. Like I actually think most of it comes from like arbitrageurs and stuff. And that's more of a mechanism of like how cheap the fees are and how profitable it is to like get an arbitrage or something. Right. And so on Solana, it's still profitable to send 99 transactions if only one's going to land, because even if you capture that 3-cent arbitrage, you still make money because those other 99, even that failed, you didn't pay for. Right. And that's kind of the economic problem is that like in Monad, like it's not going to be free to send a transaction. So if you send 99 and only one's going to land, you're going to end up paying for those 99, which kind of makes you back off like the level of like arbitrage that you're willing to just like spam for. Right.
Right. But that was the whole point of Solana though.
Yeah. You're paying the 99 on Solana.
I mean, you're paying the base fee, but it's like, it's zero essentially.
It's below a set. But that was the whole appeal of Solana was that as a developer, I could sponsor gas and never have to even think about how much I'm spending. It's essentially free. If we start addressing the problem from that standpoint, at what point does this lose its appeal a bit? I just wonder about that.
I think you can get as close to like the cost of actual data bandwidth, right? But this is actually somewhere where I disagree with like Solana, is that like, I actually think like you do have to have transaction costs at like a base level that can cover basically validator costs and electricity for like sending transactions over the network. And so like, yeah, like, I don't know. I actually do think like the base fee needs to actually take into account like how complex the transaction is and then like charge for it. Because like block space is fundamentally a limited resource. It's like how many cycles you can spin. And so, yeah, like this is where I like somewhat disagree with that fee model, right? So,
but they are talking, aren't they, about having variable base fees,
right? Which like we'll see. I think again, this is where like continuous block propagation gets into a little bit of a headache. Which is why I've kind of won over to like the no scheduling side of thing is like, even with 1559, like the accuracy of what's like, it's disincentivizing you like hitting an account, but that's like not actually like, it's actually cheaper for the computer to run a bunch of transactions hitting the same accounts because you only have to load it into memory once. And so like, it's almost backwards from like the actual cost of what you're trying to meter, you know what I mean? And so that's where I'm like, we'll see. Like, I think it'll work from an economic standpoint, but it's like, you kind of want to incentivize, like, it's actually like better if every transaction in the block hits the same account because loading that once and then running it serially is actually cheaper than loading like the whole block worth of different accounts and then running those, even in parallel. And so like the EIP 1559 thing is saying like, oh, if you send a bunch of things to the same market, like we're going to charge you more. We're not going to discount you, which in the heart and like the actual resources space, like it should technically be a discount.
maybe just related to what we're talking about, but Multicoin recently, well, they actually had this thesis back in 2022, but they think that fee income basically is going to be negligible in the future for the L1s, and then MEV will be the only material revenue line basically for all of these L1s. But I suppose, yeah, how do we feel about that? Firstly, there's your point that really the base fee probably should be enough to cover the electricity and the hardware costs, things like that, for the validators. And then to me, there's also this piece about, is all execution commoditizable? Because people aren't just executing on any random old chain, they're executing on Solana and Ethereum and some of the L2s. So it seems strange to me to think that that could ever completely go away, but wondering if you've got any thoughts, either of you.
I mean, just look at the chart with, I think Blockworks research at it, Jito, or rather Solana MEV like exceeds Ethereum and MEV now. And that's in spite of the fact that Solana fee is historically low. There's just a lot of opportunities for MEV extraction on Solana. That's appealing. And now, 3 months ago when Jito did the airdrop, people were wondering, like, this thing makes no revenue a year. Why is this worth 5 billion or whatever FTV? And now it's looking like Jito might be a true blue chip thing to just hold. Like, it has a pretty diversified set of products, and they are going to make a ton of revenue just because their protocol takes a fee and all of the MEV rewards that get distributed. So yeah, I feel like Multicoin's pretty much spot on. That's all I have to say. I mean, there's not a ton to add. It's pretty interesting seeing it actually shake out and looking at the data over the past few months and how much it's changed in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I actually tend to agree. I think at some point, the proper design of a blockchain is just going to be known, and most blockchains are going to do that. And so your fee mechanisms will probably be as close to the data actual network costs as possible. Right. And then at that point, it's okay, what's the economic opportunity on each chain? And that's going to be captured by MEV. Right. And so that's probably the distinguishing profit factor in the long tail of these things.
Yeah, I think we talked totally about this when he was on the pod a little while ago, but it'll always be a thing. It'll always be a driving force. The only difference is with crypto, anyone can kind of participate in accruing or pursuing MEV and extracting value. It's not just gated to gigantic institutions with hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on infra. But it is interesting that essentially one protocol is the only facilitator on Solana, and they're going to probably win pretty big unless someone else can come in and compete. I don't know. That's pretty hard to do at this point with the network effects, but possible, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny how many times we hear hey, we want to build the Jito of Monet. They definitely made it. No, I don't know. It's permissionless network, right? And once we go open source, it makes more sense. If you tell us this now, it's okay, well, we're not open source, so you can build Jito of Monet right now, anyways. But we will go open source here in a couple of months. At which point it's a more serious conversation. But it's just funny that they've literally made a product category to the point where people are approaching other chains and being hey, we want to do this of your chain, which is pretty rare to see in crypto, right? You see that with Eigenlayer too, actually. You see a bunch of hey, we want to do the restaking layer of X or Y, So, yeah.
In a way, they've sort of borrowed from a lot of the Ethereum basic protocols and then just put them together, which obviously the MEV bit and then the LSTs. And now they're also talking about restaking as well. So it's almost like they've taken Lido, Eigenlayer, and Flashbots and just put it all under one roof effectively.
Yeah, they're the Jupiter of infra on Solana. They just do everything.
Yeah, I actually think that opens up a new kind of interesting conversation to talk about is I think we've been seeing some of the ETH narratives bleed into Solana, right? Yeah. Which I think is kind of interesting. You're hearing people talk about rollups on Solana. You're hearing people talk about restaking on Solana, which are, traditionally thought of in Ethereum circles. And I think these congestion issues kind of brought to light the usefulness of some of this stuff. It's just interesting to see Solana go through that, right? and be like,
I
wait,
don't know.
actually,
How much of this is just like the market's up, it's time to raise some money, it's time to copy paste an infra bet on a new chain, or not a new chain, but a chain that hasn't seen much infra, and then just, you know, raise money, do the same kind of play that all these guys have been doing for the longest time. I suspect a lot of it has to do with that versus like, hey, we really could use a roll up on Solana right now that no one's going to use. And that, I mean, do any even exist? Are people even using them today? I don't know.
I mean,
to me, it
Drip
feels like an
House
opportunity.
was pretty, like Drip House was pretty vocal about like wanting an L2 on Solana for their.
Everyone wants an L2
operation.
though, because they want
Yeah.
to have L2 economics for their token or whatever they end up doing. Do they actually want it for the reason that they need it? Is my question.
I think Drip, it made sense
Fair.
when the whole, you know, whole of
Congestion.
Solana was basically going kaput and they couldn't send out all of their NFTs each week. I think that did make sense. But I think Vibu is also saying, I get that it should be better in a couple of years or post fired answer once that's sort of up to speed. So maybe it's more like a short-term fix. But I completely hear you that there are going to be, you know, we've seen it with Blurg becoming their own L2 on Ethereum. And yeah, there is going to be that incentive for app chains, especially when you consider how undervalued or overvalued infrastructure is or undervalued apps are in crypto. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So of course,
it's only starting to flip now.
I was thinking maybe this could be the next narrative, because I kind of feel like all these infra deals, they've all just been VC'd up to the hilt, basically. They're all launching, as we know, at 5, 10, 15 billion FDV. The only access that retail can currently get is via airdrops, which is a limited ceiling, basically, on how much you can actually earn. They're not creating cults because people aren't holding these from the bottom and investing all their capital at the bottom. They're just selling their airdrop as soon as it comes. So I kind of feel like all of the current infra plays basically are dying a death. And maybe this is the opportunity for app chains. So we've seen, apps. And we've seen like Frentech, they've just launched, I think, 100% of their tokens to their users all in one go. So, I mean, I think that could well be the next meta, because we need some way for retail to actually get exposure and get involved with these projects and not just get a couple of $1,000s in an airdrop, which they instantly dump.
Yeah, unless you're one of the Jito recipients, got really enough. Now, I mean, this is a big topic, and we could talk about it in a few different ways. One is just like, if you're trading tokens, why would you hold an infra token if you could just get kind of your beta exposure through a blue chip meme like WIF?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are thinking about this decision tree. Funds, individuals, doesn't matter how much money you have. Like, there are now blue chip memes that you can enter positions in size. There's that guy on Twitter or whatever that, you know, took a $10 million WIF position in January, and now it's at like 50, right? So a lot of people are like wise, and they're waking up to this, and they're realizing like memes just can resonate with a larger audience, easier to understand, simpler, and you still get that beta exposure outside of just holding the L1. And so I think part of it just has to do with the success of that narrative, which has been clearly the top narrative for the last 3 months or so. And then part of it is what you're saying. It's frustration with all of these infra plays, all of these tokens that the airdrops are abysmal. They'll airdrop 3% of their supply or something. You turn all of your hours spent airdrop farming into like a K. I think, what was the one that got clowned recently? Was it Camino that was just like, you know, $100 or something? Maybe I'm wrong with the exact amount, but they're getting clowned now.
There's been loads. There's been loads.
Like Sharky was giving out like one shark.
That was awful. Yeah, that was awful.
Like, oh my God. The opportunity cost of that capital too was just like, they could have bought WHIP in December and probably made $1 million versus, you know, taking 5K and trying to like reapothecate it through 10 protocols.
Yeah.
I can layer on. It's super interesting.
100%. I mean, they got brutalized on the timeline. So I don't know. I think now we're seeing this transition. To me, like the bet I made a year ago in building an application in crypto was exactly what we're talking about. I felt the frustration just a year ago, because VCs would only talk to you if you were infra. You were building an app, forget about it, because there's no comps for them. There's nothing. There was no example of an app ever crossing 1 billion FTV other than Axie Infinity and StepN. Or maybe if you go back far into 2016, you could probably find some random thing like Steemit. So to them, a no-go on the economics, no interest whatsoever. Whereas there's hundreds of infra projects that have broken 1 billion FTV. The key thing, though, is I think this cycle, that's going to flip just because of the frustration we've talked about. And there are truly a lot of interesting applications. Friendtech is just one of many. There's a ton in stealth. Talk to some of these teams that are coming out in the next few months that are also going to do really interesting things on chain that may have a token. And to me, that seems like it's just going to resonate with people more. And we'll probably see a lot of people bidding towards those tokens versus some random infra thing that no one even understands what it does at the end of the day.
But also, is there something structural with applications in terms of how much is sold to VCs? Because as we know, with all these infra plays, basically you're lucky to get 10% across sort of 3 seasons. That's going to, last like 5 years.
The only difference with applications in infra, the allocation for the percentages are exactly the same. It's just the valuation is going to be lower because VCs will punish you for building an app. Like, how dare you build an app in crypto? I'm going to give you the worst term sheet possible. That's the only reason, because then these things come out and they come out at lower valuations, and so retail can enter at an appropriate price point. Or in the case of Friendtech, it's just all community airdrop. So it's essentially there is no
self-funded.
Theoretically, there's no. I know Chow put out that tweet saying like, yeah, I mean the team and the investors could also do a second token, and then that has economics good for the investors, and then people would get comped 1-to-1 at whatever 15% percentage for the community. That's possible. Also, maybe they just decide their onshore entity just accrues all the fees. That aside, I mean, look, Friendtech, a lot of people made good money off of that, and that's a clean application that's in the hundreds of millions of dollars in market cap.
And the fact they were able to give it all away, to me, it suggests that you could well have applications coming out where they just have been able to self-fund the whole time. They might have been fairly wealthy to begin with, rolling profits from a previous project, that sort of thing. And hopefully we are going to start seeing some applications where they can say, actually, I'm just going to give the majority of it away to community, because somehow we need to find a new way this cycle for retail to be more engaged. Because all we have right now is meme coins, and it's no coincidence. It's because that's the only way that the majority / all of the tokens are going to retail, and they're not going to VCs. And they're starting from a low valuation. So somehow you have to recreate that if you want any other meta to explode this cycle. And so I think these underloved apps is exactly the sort of thing which could get the market going again.
For sure.
I think we're also seeing, like, in the same way like NFTs were something like novel and new and people got excited about, like, I think we're actually seeing this happen on the app side of crypto. Like, people are centering in on like what makes crypto valuable in an app setting, like the properties of like the social aspects of it and the coordination aspects of it, and kind of like the like immutable, like we talked to Moonwalk, recently, where it's just like incentivization of behaviors, but because it's immutable, like once you make the bet, you can't take it back. Right. And so I've seen a lot of plays that are like actually playing up on like the real properties of what a blockchain is useful for now, which to me is like kind of a canary in a coal mine of like almost being on this like app gold rush, right? It's like we finally centered these things on like what actually makes blockchains useful rather than just some like random narrative. And so like it kind of gives me more hopes for apps this cycle.
For sure. They're still not usable though. Have you guys played with Friendtech? The V2?
Tiny bit.
My God, it's the same PWA nonsense. It's I just don't see regular people ever using that. I just don't. It's people like us that crazy enough to use these things. Until Apple allows crypto to work on the iPhone, it's going to be a hard sell to get regular people to use this stuff. I mean, one workaround has been Telegram. That's why those bots work. But other than that, that's why I'm more bullish Ton and that whole ecosystem, because at least that stuff works pretty well in Telegram. It doesn't work in the US because they don't enable the wallet, but everywhere else, I mean, that is pretty impressive what you can do in there.
I increasingly feel like Ton is going to be the dark horse of this cycle, just because they have the distribution, which no other project can claim to. So it really does feel like it's got a massive, massive advantage. I remember someone a while ago saying when everyone was certain that Ethereum had won and nothing could beat Ethereum, They just sort of posed the one question: if Apple came in tomorrow and built their own blockchain, would that compete or outcompete Ethereum? I think the answer is yes. I think so. And that shows, therefore, that it didn't have unconquerable moats yet. And I think that Ton coming in is similar to that play. And I think they could easily take a huge part of the market share just this cycle in a very short space of time. So it's definitely one that I'm watching without knowing too much about it.
Yeah. I mean, so one point I'll make, though, on your comment is that Apple already has millions of developers building on Apple. Like, there's literally people that are diehard Android fans that will buy a MacBook so they could use Xcode. Telegram doesn't have that. There's only like a few hundred or so Ton apps. The SDK still, there's a lot of work to be done to make it more friendly for developers, because we're building a mini app for BULLPEN, and so we kind of see this firsthand. They have a long way to go to like onboard developers. I think slowly but surely they will, but it's not as like clean as like, you know, a company that's been doing it for 20 years. Because essentially, if you're an L1, your customers, developers, it's not end users. It could be end users too in a way, but that's going to be the biggest chasm that they need to cross, is make it easier for developers to use it and make the primitives more clean and polished. There's just a lot of weird quirks with building a Telegram that we're learning the hard way. Shockingly, there's just some things that you can't do in that interface. I think it'll improve, though, pretty quickly, just as interest is rocketed up.
Yeah, it's actually like Apple is like pretty careful about when they release a new platform to actually release like a whole new, like they call them like kits. You know, there's like VR kit, you know, and like 3D kit and like, you know, graphics kit and these things, which is essentially just like SDKs alongside their products, right? And so when like, you know, the Apple Vision Pro shipped, like there was an entire developer kit alongside it. So you could like build apps on that. I don't think like any blockchains are actually that far yet.
Do we think gaming is going to get anywhere? Because I think increasingly I'm becoming maybe slightly bearish. My recent thesis is that a lot of these crypto games are just this skeuomorphic Web 2 thing where you're just trying to add on a crypto wallet. And in fact, the real crypto native games are already happening, and they are DeFi farming, and they're NFT hunting, and now they're Memecoin trading on pump.fun. I think those are the truly like crypto native games where it's just all out speculation and you're having to work out the meta and work out, you know, how to get the alpha. And yeah, increasingly I kind of think that these games coming on, unless they are truly incredible, it's just such an uphill struggle, and just tagging on an NFT wallet onto them, I just think it's a skeuomorphic view of what crypto gaming could be like. But wondering.
Well, I mean, were you guys ever like pilled on the metaverse? Because I was not.
I was.
You
I
were?
still am.
Yeah.
I still am.
Yeah.
It makes complete sense. It's just, look, the stuff, the hardware is just too big. It's uncomfortable. Even Apple can't even get the hardware right. You have to have the battery pack here. This thing it weighs on you. It's like wearing a neck weight on your head. But when it gets to the point where it's like your guys' glasses, you know, we're not going to live in real life. We're only going to live in the metaverse. We already do. Like, just go to any building and look at what the doorman's doing. They're on their phone the entire time. They're not even looking if people are going in and out. It's not that big of a jump to imagine a world where, you know, we're just always just in this pseudo metaverse, but sort of AR world, just flipping back and forth. So I'm very pilled. I think, you know, it's funny. Like it was a meme in 2021. Meta looks kind of dumb for renaming their company and now just being an AI company essentially. But I'm still bullish. I'm still bullish.
100%.
I mean,
AR VR glasses. The big benefit is you become hands free all of a sudden.
Yes.
And yeah, you can't take that away. That would be a huge leap forward, and 100% I think people would adopt that. And we asked Kyle Samani, I remember, and he said he thought maybe 10 years before the hardware could fit into a pair of glasses. So watch this space.
I think that's my main thing. It's like, I think we're actually like quite a bit farther away from that hardware getting to like a place where all of this is possible. And that's kind of why I'm bearish on the metaverse. I'm like, look, like most VR goggles you can't wear for more than 6 hours before like getting sick. Do we really want to be strapping TVs to our eyeballs Like literally as a kid, I was told not to sit too close to the TV, and now I'm like buying a product that's like beaming TV into my
welded
eyes.
to your face.
And so I'm like, guys, I think like we're maybe a little bit far from the metaverse. That's my thesis there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, to your point on gaming, though, I wrote this long report on crypto gaming in like 2022. The main takeaway from it is just games are hard. Forget about crypto. Like, name the last like new breakout game in the world. Fortnite, and maybe you could argue the battle royale that COD put out. Yeah, I don't know. There's like occasional viral hits that come in and out. There was that, I forget the name, but everybody was playing it for like 2 months and then everyone stopped. The point is like it's really hard for breakout games to come about. It's like a black swan event. So if you're trying to do that and do crypto, which essentially means you have to do it on a computer because consoles don't interact with wallets yet. They're working on it, and I'm sure they're going to come out with it soon. Or mobile. But even mobile, like you have to use weird workarounds to get if you're going to do an app to process transactions. Yeah, I would say I'd rather, if I were a betting man, just focus on other verticals or get beta exposure to it rather than try to just pick out the one game that's going to win. Because even like the games that do win, like Fortnite was building for the longest time a zombie game, a survival game. And they pivoted like at the last minute. You know, they worked on it for 7 years. And then it was because zombies used to be popular in COD, you know, back in World War II, that version of COD in 2009. They come out with the zombie one, or they're about to, and then they noticed this genre of battle royale started taking off in the APAC region, and they just built it like in a few months, a Fortnite version of battle royale that had the more cartoony graphics, and that is what took off. It was so random. It was completely random. They didn't even plan to do that. So all that to say, like, yeah, gaming is just really tough. I wouldn't. I think it'll happen, like crypto gaming. It's impossible to know like where this adoption is going to come from.
Yeah, I think like at this stage, the gaming projects that are looking at blockchains are looking at them more as a distribution mechanism than an actual like value add to the game. They're like, oh, it's like, oh, well, this blockchain has users, then like blockchain users are typically more prone to dog food products. And so we can have like distribution that we wouldn't have otherwise in like a Web2 setting facing like all the other games, right? Mm-hmm. Which isn't like the strongest reason to use crypto, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah. It's high floor, low ceiling.
Yeah.
So if you I mean, I think it's quite an interesting time to be chatting because obviously we've had the big run up for like the last 6 months. We've had this sort of mini crash in the middle of the bull market. Things stabilizing. So I suppose the question is, how are we feeling about the rest of the cycle, and where would you be allocating or paying attention to at the moment? Because it sounds like we think metaverse is way out. Gaming is super difficult. Is it still L1s or Bitcoin, Solana, and meme coins? Do we need to start looking at the next gen L1s? Or do you think it's another vertical?
So Solana, I think to me, it's blue chip. It's always a safe bet, that ecosystem. Or if you want to get more of a levered bet, so to speak, blue chip memes and Solana, specifically with, is looking pretty strong. I just feel like that's only going to get funnier and more viral over time. As far as emergent ecosystems, I like Ton. I actually like Monet a lot. I think that it's going to do well. So I'm paying close attention to what's going to happen there over the next. That's more of a medium, longer term, like the next 6 to 12 months. And I'm paying close attention to, or starting to, the Bitcoin ecosystem and Bitcoin adjacent projects. I think Stacks just did a huge update. Everyone hates Stacks. Since the day I entered crypto, everyone says it's the worst ecosystem ever. And I don't know, man. They just keep on doing things. So paying attention there. To me, the barbell strategy makes sense. I'm not really paying any attention to ETH other than some select L2s like Blast. I don't know. Every time I open MetaMask, I want to die. So I just can't do it. I just would rather not open it.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel the same way. I'm also kind of like a little bit hesitant. It feels like I don't know what the new thing is this cycle, right? That doesn't feel clear like it
Yeah.
did in the last
Yeah.
cycle. You know, it was like NFTs, DeFi. It was like very clear those are new product categories. I think we're like maybe banging on the door of social fi, right? A little bit, but like I'm not 100% sure. It just doesn't feel as like, oh yeah, like you were having people like on Spaces theorize about like transforming society based on like primitives that were in like DeFi and like NFTs, right? And like I don't see that with any of the things that are going on today. Maybe it's because they're more like grounded in reality and what blockchains can actually do. But like it does feel a little bit like a bull market in search of a narrative. And like
I mean,
that narrative right now feels very much to just be Bitcoin. Like, and as a result, it's like Solana recovery as well. You know, like Bitcoin, there is new stuff going on. So I think that's pretty bullish, right?
I think you have to look at meme coins. I don't think you can say that hasn't been, in my view, the main theme of the bull market. I agree, Bitcoin ETF is the other one. But I think meme coins, and I think there is something at least net new, which is the ability to create them very, very cheaply, very, very quickly. Them sort of forming, I think, more of a cultural hold, you know, being far more up to date. Previous cycles, it's just been Doge, which was created in 2012 or whatever, and Shiba was sort of the only other one, really. Now it's far more of the moment. And I think there's something there. I appreciate it's harder to spin, even though the VCs are trying, it's harder to spin a sort of a grand vision of how crypto is going to transform everything. But I think just in the same way that monkey JPEGs were a form of NFTs, but NFTs in general could be used to tokenize the world's assets. So I think meme coins are a form of tokens, and really we are bootstrapping a global DeFi substrate. So that's sort of how I see it, but it's not quite as clear or as sexy really as a narrative as we've had in previous cycles. And 100% I do agree that I think we are currently at a loss for the next narrative.
Yeah, actually,
I mean, that's a
you
good
nailed it.
point. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and like to me, this is actually why also when I first started working this company, I specifically didn't want to do anything with NFTs because I just saw a lot of the issues with fixed issuance, having the JPEG. It's kind of confusing. I was very bullish liquid tokens. I never would have predicted that we would have 300,000 plus, or now it's 400,000 new tokens made on pumped up fund in 2 months, right? But just thematically aligning with what you're saying, Dave, that is a huge innovation. You're essentially tokenizing attention and things happening in real life. People can respond to it, make a ticker, try to like bootstrap a community. These are all really important and really hard things to do online. But somehow this thing, this token primitive that's permissionless, anyone can make it, actually captures almost all of crypto's most important use cases in one. It's non-custodial, it's permissionless, it's transferable, it has a price, it has market, it has a price discovery mechanism, it rewards early adopters, but it can be like a virus. It's a meme, it can spread like wildfire and actually move markets. It can put a picture of a dog on the Vegas sphere, right? It uses DeFi, but it doesn't actually focus on DeFi. It just focuses on the attention grabbing mechanism. And so anyone that's bearish meme coins just doesn't even understand what the point of crypto is. It's not to pontificate about Eigenlayer for 3 months, and they still haven't shipped the actual thing that Eigenlayer is supposed to do, just slashing. It's to use crypto and sign transactions and get people excited about it. So extremely bullish. That whole sector, I think it's only going to just rocket up in adoption. The writing has been on the wall since 2021 with GME. None of this stuff is new. These behaviors have been emergent since then. And crypto just allows you to do it on steroids and do it in a more powerful way and in a way that rewards early adopters. So yeah, but completely agree. I think that's why VCs are finally starting to get it, because they probably are using Uniswap for the first time in 8 months to buy some of these things. Now they understand. But it is what it is. At least they understand now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point because, like, I did talk about like the social, like, it feels like there's like some sort of like on the brim of something social. And I think like meme coins just aren't new. So like I maybe discount that, right? But the convergence of these like social primitives with this meme coin attention grabbing virus, right? That is like a great point, I think. Yeah.
It's powerful.
I think if it's going to be a meme coin super cycle, I think it's probably going to start to be pervasive in other areas of crypto. So yeah, I think SocialFi is going to adopt these meme coins in a very big way. We're seeing it with NFTs, ERC 404 and SBL 404, how the NFTs are interchangeable with meme coins themselves. Projects also starting to use meme coins as a way to bootstrap a community. I mean, maybe is what we've been talking about earlier in this episode about a lot of these projects launching at massive FTVs. Maybe that's a way to reward the community with something which isn't, which hasn't been sort of ravaged by the VCs already. And we sort of saw it with Jupiter. They had a failed one with Mockjup, but then Mew, which was the cat meme coin that they launched just to dog food their platform, that's done really, really well and made a lot of people a lot of money. So yeah, it feels like a sort of a foundational crypto substrate, which I think we'll start seeing in other areas, just as we have done with NFTs, really. Exactly.
In a way, like Bitcoin was the original meme coin. Like there was no reason why it needed to be worth that much, right? But it's this ultimate kind of pushback against gigantic institutions. It rallied an entire industry from nothing to what it is today. And to me, meme coins do that, but in a more decentralized way, and probably at the more application level. So it's, yeah, I agree. We're going to enter the super cycle for that, and we'll see. More importantly, applications start to kind of leverage these primitives in ways. I think Friendtech V2 is pretty interesting. We're doing with what they're doing with clubs, and I think they teased today some additional features that they put out that I'll be paying attention to.
Yeah, I actually think like most of the people trading NFTs last cycle would have preferred to trade meme coins, but they just like weren't as prolific at the time, right? Yeah. And so it's almost like meme coins have like taken a lot of the sharp edges out of NFTs that we were like skeuomorphically like pushing into them because we didn't have anything better. Essentially because like meme coins hadn't come to Solana, right? And the place where you could do like high activity was like the NFT chain. You know, and so everyone was like putting these things into NFTs. And now that like meme coins have come to Solana, you know, I think a lot of people are realizing, like you said, Sal, that like it's just like a better mechanism for incentivizing the same behavior than having to do it in like a very discrete format. Right.
And it's a forcing function because you can't attach an intellectual theory to a meme coin because the name actually rejects it, the very nature of over intellectualizing it. Whereas NFTs, you have a whole conference where there's 100,000 people trying to tell you how it's going to change music and movies and this and that. And, you know, half the people don't really care. And the other half just want to, you know, exit their position as soon as possible. But it's a bit more of an honest exercise. And that's why you're seeing these feedback loops move faster, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I do feel like we had meme coins originally and they were like rejected because there's like, oh, this isn't like pure crypto, right? And now they're like coming back around and people are realizing like, wait, this actually did like get at some of the core usefulness of crypto. Like maybe this time we don't just ignore that, right? It's kind of the same energy that's behind all this social fi. It's like, how do you bootstrap communities? And really that is like the power of blockchains is like social coordination technology, like fundamentally. And these like tokens give like a fun way to do that. And now we're finally at like a point in the tech where like that can be useful to like many different aspects. I actually think what Mad Lads has done for like Backpack Exchange is like really unique in the sense that like they did just bootstrap a whole brand out of an NFT collection, like even though they're building an exchange, which is not necessarily directly linked to it, right? And I think that's a little bit easier to do as a meme coin now, right? It's like lower stakes. I think kind of NFTs in that sense are like playing on hard mode. So it's cool to see.
I hope we do see as well an emergence of the SPL 404 and the ERC 404 metas, because I think meme coins with NFTs, I think would be really, really powerful as well. So hopefully we'll see something like that later on in the cycle. Just one thing that came to mind when you were talking about Bitcoin being the original meme coin is ore mining on Solana. I saw yesterday that Colosseum Hackathon have named it as like their grand prize winner. So yeah, just wondering how we all feel about it. Hopefully we'll get Hard Hat Chad onto the pod soon. But for me, it's almost uncomfortable because Bitcoin, you're like, okay, that's fine. That's got this mimetic power and it's got value. But when you try and do something similar on Solana, it feels strange to try and denote value to it. So how are you feeling about, or does it have a future?
I actually like really like it. I think it like, you know, in the same way, like Sal was saying, Bitcoin's a meme coin. I think like in some sense, like it's going to really take some mimetic value to accrue to it to be what it wants to be. But as like an experiment of what it wants to be, I think it's actually like a brilliant idea.
I kind of feel like in a bull market, which has been devoid of too many like interesting experiments, I think it is one that has caught my eye for sure.
I mean, I'm interested to hear what Sal thinks about it.
I haven't spent too much time. I mean, obviously I see it on the timeline, but I don't have like a huge take on ore or anything like that at the moment.
So maybe just for the audience, like what is ore, right? It's just like basically Bitcoin on Solana. So you're doing proof of work mining, where you submit the hash that you like mine the block to Solana, and then you get some coins on Solana. So maybe just set that out there for people. Could be interesting. It's like, you know, Totally has talked about it in like some podcasts where like if Solana is the spam prevention mechanism, like it doesn't make sense for it to also be the store of value. And like he would love to see like a decentralized store of value built on top of Solana because he thinks it's like the best network to transact it on. And this is like the first credibly like similar thing to Bitcoin, but like native on Solana. So it kind of like brings life back to that narrative, right? It's like, okay, if people can get around it, like conceptually as it being a store of value, it seems like it's going to work. But that also like, I think like the social weight of like a Bitcoiner being like, oh, well, we can have Bitcoin on Solana is like a bit of a stretch, right? Like all the like, so we'll see. You know, if Solana eats the world, maybe or eats the world along with it. But I think it's like pretty dependent to like, it's pretty tied to Solana adoption, right? So
Awesome. I think we covered a lot of topics. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on?
We should do a pick, like just a pick. Yeah. Like what should we pay attention to from each one of us?
I think there's going to be a breakout social app that's not FriendTech in the next 2 months. I just know too many teams in stealth.
BULLPEN?
not even including BULLPEN, although we'll see what happens there. I just see too many teams in stealth, man, that are doing really interesting things.
Dave?
It's tough, but I think given it's an election year, I think that the political meme coins are definitely ones to watch, Bowden being the obvious one. Although I think Bowden comes with this sort of duality where you're a bit confused. Are you a Biden fan or not? I think obviously you're not a Biden fan, but people definitely have got confused about it. But yeah, I think political meme coins is likely to form center stage. And my God, if any of the big names in politics actually mention any of these, Trump being the number one.
Oh my God! If Trump calls Biden Bowden on TV, like that's it. It's
game
done.
Over.
No, I think like I just think the MetaDAO is the thing to watch. Like the just like brand new governance mechanism that's like hella interesting. So
yeah, it's a good shout.
All right, exciting stuff. Well, excited for the next roundtable.
Awesome.